بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. صلاة والسلام على خاتم الأنبياء سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. All right, yay for Leicester University. How cool is this with purple chairs? Purple is the color of Rabata, so I approve. Did you change them just for me? Yeah. أهلا وسهلا عليكم السلام ورحمة الله. Yep, so I'm Tamara Gray. Just so you remember my name, it rhymes with camera. I don't know if it rhymes with camera in British English. How do you say camera? Same? Okay, so it rhymes with camera. And my life story, what brings me here today, I suppose, my life story is I became a Muslim in 1985. I know that was like before some of your parents were born. Not yours, yeah. And I became a Muslim in 1985. And it was actually not very easy to be a Muslim in the United States in 1985. It was a little bit of a challenge, especially as a woman. And I found myself very frustrated. And so at one point in those first early years, I don't know, I remember standing on the street corner, kind of throwing my hands up in the air and saying, Ya Allah, I need help here. And alhamdulillah, I met a woman who lived in California who told me about these women teachers in Syria. So I was like, I got to go there. And so I did. I found a Syrian guy. I didn't think back then that I could just go on my own. Nowadays, people just travel on their own. But this was in the 80s, before that became fashionable. And the story is a little bit longer than that. I mean, we got married and I had a couple kids in the United States. First, I finished my master's degree. Then I went to Damascus. I studied Islamic studies while I was there for 20 years. And I was also working in the field of education, and had another child. And then when the war started in 2012, I went back to the United States. The war started before 2012, but after the war started, by 2012, I went back to the United States. And when I was in the United States, I did a tour. There was a planned tour, and I did a speaking tour across the United States. Some of my students who had come to Syria in order to study with me, they arranged a tour around the United States. So I went, and I was shocked to find that at least in what I could perceive, there had been no change in the state or status of Muslim women in American Muslim society in 20 years. 20 years. And so there are details that are unnecessary here, but that's when we started the organization that I run. I also went back to school and finished a doctorate in leadership. And of course, during all of those years, most importantly, from the time I was 11, and then again in the 90s, and again in the last 5 years, I was watching Star Wars. And I actually run my halaqat. Are you here as Star Wars fans or no? Okay, so I need to put you in a little bit of a Star Wars picture so you understand why I'm interested in Star Wars. Star Wars in the 70s, the first 3 movies that came out in the 70s, I was about 10, 11, 12 years old. And I saw those. Like, I remember going to the theater and seeing them, and it was a big deal. Like, the special effects back then, we were all just going, whoa, this is incredible. But most importantly, George Lucas, originally when he wrote those movies, he wrote them to remind people about believing in God. So there was a sort of intentional spiritual element to this otherwise very sci-fi movie. And I loved them. And then in the 90s, so those are the 3 basic stories, okay? In the 90s, there were the prequels. So those are the stories that came before the ones in the 70s. And if you talk to Star Wars fans, there's a big debate about those. Are they any good? Are they good or not? Do they ruin the basic premise of the Force? What are they talking about over here? And then now in the last, 5, 6, 7 years, they've been coming out with the epilogue, the postquel, I don't know what you call it, the sequel, the last 3. And this month, of course, is the very, very last one. So this talk is called Spiritual Force. Maybe you have one. And really, I'm thinking about this around the concept of spiritual intelligence. So in the movie, the idea of the Force is that you, as a human, people have different levels of midichlorians in their body. This is the movie, okay? Not real. This is the movie. And so depending on how many midichlorians you have, it depends on how much you can access the Force with ease. So Yoda, do you know who Yoda is at least? Okay, good. So Yoda is a little green guy. And Yoda has this really high number of midichlorians, and that's why he can, and his species actually has a high number of midichlorians, and that's why he can access the Force easily. And then there's this whole drama in the whole show about Anakin Skywalker, who also had very high midichlorians, but then he turned to the dark side. But all of this, if we want to bring it to our world today, can be connected to the idea of spiritual intelligence. So, do we have spiritual intelligence, and what exactly is spiritual intelligence? There's a, I don't know what you guys are studying here at Leicester, but there's a whole study, there was a whole study about intelligence in the 90s. Howard Gardner did this whole, from Harvard University. He sort of flipped the understanding in the world of education around intelligence. It was a really important change in the world of education, because before that there was this understanding amongst general population that the intelligence is static, okay? That that you can't change it. You're born smart, you're born really smart, you're born kind of smart, you're born and you're stuck with whatever it is, however you're born. That was the IQ. Now IQ, the intelligence quotient, the IQ test, I'm sure do you do IQ tests in England? Okay, so the IQ test was actually based on an exam that was written by a man named Binet in Paris. And he wrote this test for very sort of economic and social reasons, to sort of figure out how to manage schooling and things like that. And when the Americans got a hold of this IQ test, it became this static test to decide who's intelligent and who isn't. Howard Gardner said this doesn't make any sense. We have people that have done great things with different types. It seems to me there are different types of intelligence. And then he wrote and studied and did a lot of research around it, and wrote about originally 7 different intelligences. From there, he expanded that to 8, and then he expanded it into 9. And the 9th intelligence was spiritual intelligence, or existential intelligence, he also called it. Now, he did research, but he really struggled to tie it down as far as what exactly is spiritual intelligence. And I think that we'll talk some more about why he might have struggled with that. And so he left it, and he left his research, at least as far as I know. I haven't gone back to double check. As far as I know, he left his research at 7 or 8 intelligences that schools are very serious about now in the United States. I don't know if you work with them here, but in the United States, we work with multiple intelligences quite a bit. And we make sure that lesson plans include access to different types of intelligences for the children and things like this. But the question around spiritual intelligence, which is, do we have spiritual intelligence, is quite similar actually to this Jedi idea of midichlorians. That are there people that have more spiritual intelligence than others? And can we access spiritual intelligence, and can we grow it? And if we can grow it, how do we do that? How do we grow it? So for the Jedis in Star Wars, there's Jedi school, where you take their younglings, they set out as younglings, they take them to school and they teach them how to access the Force. They teach them how to use their lightsaber. They teach them how to move things, and then you have this electricity they can use from their hands, and all sorts of crazy things that they can do. And this has all been taught to them by school for Jedis. And then they become a Padawan, they're like an apprentice to their Jedi master, etc. So our question as Muslims is, are there different spiritual intelligences? And if so, what can we do to access our spiritual intelligence? Because if we can't access it, or if we don't access it, we might be in grave danger to come to a point of annihilation of spirituality in our community. And we are right now, we stand at what I would say is a very dangerous place, which is there is a great push in Western countries for us to identify ourselves as sort of an identity of Muslim. As in, I'm a Muslim, it's my identity. And there's a political benefit in that, which is important. And I don't want to belittle that or put it to the side or say it's not important, but there's also a danger. And that danger is if we get too involved in Muslim as identity, we may get away from Muslim as spiritual life. And when we move away from Muslim as spiritual life, it'll be one generation and it won't have meaning anymore. And indeed, in the movies, the last movie that came out was The Last Jedi. And so the whole point there is this the end of the Jedi? Is this the end of access to the Force? Is this, and it's a very big tragedy, like people who like me who've been following Star Wars for many years, we're all like, oh my God, this can't be, where are the Jedis? We need Jedis. What's going on? What's happening? Oh no, what happened to the Jedi Temple? If you haven't seen it, you have no idea what I'm talking about, but it's a high stress point for Star Wars fans. And we all want to know what's going on and why is it called the Rise of Skywalker. But if we think about that, I mean, as a movie, we can laugh about it and think about it as funny, but if we think about ourselves as Muslims and a community that we're developing, we really want to be careful. We don't want to be the generation that was the generation of the end of a spiritual life, especially since we live in a time with so much secularism and so much materialism that we are in great and deep need for a spiritual life. So if we think about spiritual intelligence, the Prophet ﷺ, if we think about, okay, first to the question of, do people have different levels of spiritual intelligence, like the Jedis have different levels of midichlorians? That I would say, my personal opinion about that is yes. People have different levels of spiritual intelligence, just like they have different levels of emotional intelligence, just like they have different levels of what Gardner called intrapersonal intelligence or interpersonal intelligence, or kinesthetic intelligence, or the ability to visual intelligence, or let's say all these different types of intelligences. Gardner said we all have different types. And the other thing that Gardner did, which was really interesting, is he taught educators how to use, I mean, let's say you've got an auditory intelligence, okay? He taught us how to say, okay, you have an auditory intelligence, but let's say maybe you're not that great. You don't have a strong intelligence in spatial, let's say, spatial intelligence. He taught us how to use a person's strength, auditory, to help them get stronger in places they're weaker. In this, spatial is the example I use, but that's not necessary. And so if that's the case, then when we're talking about spiritual intelligence, it means that we can use our other intelligences, whether we're really good at spatial or logical or word or mathematics or numbers or whatever these things are, to strengthen our spiritual intelligence. And it also means that there are those amongst us that will have more spiritual intelligence, and that in and of itself becomes a question about how do we use that. Okay, so if we are all kind of sort of in agreement, I'm not going to give you the option to disagree with me right now, that we have different levels of spiritual intelligence. We can look at the Prophet ﷺ and really look at him as this really epitome of spiritual intelligence. This incredible level of spiritual, as a human being, even before the wahy came to him, this incredible level of spiritual intelligence. We have, for example, before the wahy came to him, his ability to receive salam from the rocks. Now we say, oh, that's because he was going to become a prophet. Yes, absolutely. But nonetheless, as a human being, he could hear salam from the rocks. What is that? That is a thinning, that is a real thinning of the veil between the material world and the spiritual world, where suddenly he, as a human being, could hear, and he would tell Aisha later, radiallahu anha, I could point out to you the rocks that used to say salam to me. When we think about the opening of his chest and the washing of his heart by the angels, what is that? That's an action. That's an action that happened, but he saw it and experienced it and remembered it. That's a level of spiritual intelligence right there. That he could experience the angels and see them and understand them and describe them later. Of course, he described them as human beings who, this very strange story of opened my chest and took out a black spot, and there are different narrations around it. But nonetheless, this is part and parcel of this spiritual intelligence of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. All before the wahi. All before the wahi. And so we begin to understand that there are certain people, there are certain gifts from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that grant spiritual intelligence. Let's define spiritual intelligence. I'm going to read my definition. Spiritual intelligence refers, in what I'm talking about today, to various skills and abilities that empower you to live in harmony with your highest values and to move unswervingly to your goals. Let's repeat that. So spiritual intelligence gives someone the ability to have various skills and abilities, we'll talk about what those skills and abilities are in a minute, that amplify your power, so they give you strength to live in harmony with your own values and move towards your goals. So as Muslims, we have particular values and we have particular goals. Now there can be spiritual goals and they can be goals of this dunya, they can be different, but spiritual intelligence helps us to move in that way with real focus. I'm going to use an acronym because sometimes that helps. So our acronym here is HEART. Okay, so H, our first letter is H. To have, one of the signs of spiritual intelligence is to have an open and flexible heart. That's the H is an open and flexible heart. What does that mean? It means that unlike Anakin Skywalker, who did not have an open and flexible heart, he had a frustrated, full of poison, full of bitterness, full of anger, very, very unstable heart, unlike Anakin Skywalker, much more like his son, actually, and especially his daughter, Leia Skywalker. It means to have a heart that is open to others, willing to love others, flexible, not immediately angered, flexible to others, very flexible, but at the same time, the heart belongs to you. This is, you know your heart, you understand it, it's open and it's flexible. There's flexibility, but you can't have flexibility without principles. It doesn't exist. That's just chaos. I've done teacher education before. And in teacher education, we teach the teachers to have a plan in school. You have to have a lesson plan. In fact, if you don't come to class with a lesson plan, time and time again, you may lose your job, right? But if the teacher comes to class with a lesson plan and veers off the plan, there's no problem. Why? Because she's open and flexible to the class in front of her to see what they need and develop what her plan is for them. This is good. But to come to class and just be like, I'm doing page 23. That's not a lesson plan. And that's not an open and flexible heart. That's a chaotic heart that doesn't have a place to sit. We don't know where it is. And that's not spiritual intelligence. The second part of spiritual intelligence, which is the E in heart, is enthusiasm. Part of spiritual intelligence is enthusiasm and positivity. Negativity and darkness, this is something that negatively affects our ability to increase and grow our spiritual intelligence. A in heart, okay, so H-E-A is awareness. And the awareness is of two things. Awareness of your present experience. This is really important. Living in the now. There are books, there's a very famous book in the United States, I don't know if it became famous here, I think it was called The Secret of Now or something, or The Secret. Did you guys have it here? Anyway, it was all about notice where you are. And because that is a spiritual skill. Not having nothing to do with Islam or not. It's just a spiritual muscle. Can you notice where you are? Most people live their lives having no idea where they are today. No appreciation for where they are today. They're thinking about tomorrow. Or they're regretting yesterday. Oh, I shouldn't have eaten that cake this morning. That's not living in the now. Or, oh man, I have an exam next week. Again, it doesn't mean we don't prepare, and it doesn't mean we don't think. But part of spiritual intelligence is the ability to live in the now, having an awareness of now, along with an awareness of the presence of God. That's the big one in spiritual intelligence. And this definition is not within Islam. This is just spiritual intelligence. We'll talk about how to use it as Muslims in a minute. But so these two are part of awareness. Awareness of now. This is where I am now, in this time, this moment. So for us, I'm in Leicester, I'm in the United Kingdom, I'm here in a room with purple chairs. I'm like this space of here I am. Here I'm grounded, feeling where your feet are, feeling where you're standing. And then at the same time of knowing your physical presence, your own personal presence, is to know and be sure of and have an awareness of the presence of the divine in all times. Those are few and far between, I think. So HEA. R is respect. Spiritual intelligence necessitates a respect for the world, for everything in the world, including plants and animals, including other human beings, including inanimate objects, including the service of one to another. It's spiritual intelligence usually means being far from ideas of class systems and things like this, because there's great respect for everyone and everything around us. And the last one then is T, and that is to be guided by tradition. Now, by tradition, I don't mean tradition that is thoughtful tradition. That's what I do mean. Thoughtful tradition, to be guided by thoughtful tradition, to understand that tradition of value, virtue, and ethics needs attention, and to be guided by that. So spiritual intelligence, we can say, is a place of the heart. And so if everyone can just think for a minute, just to by ourselves take a moment and think of what might be a symbol for you of that heart. Forget about the hearts, but just think about the shape of the heart. Think what might be a symbolic shape that would include openness and flexibility, enthusiasm, awareness, real awareness, respect, and tradition. Because finding a symbol like that is something that you can hold on to, so you can walk step by step. It's like what's the symbol of the Jedi? The lightsaber. You see the lightsaber come out, you see the lightsaber on the belt of the Jedi, and you know, oh, this is a person who has a skill and an ability to access the Force and protect me from whatever it is that might hurt me. So a person with spiritual intelligence, we need a symbol. What is that symbol? If you're a woman, is it your hijab? And what is that symbol that says, I have the capacity myself to carry on this heart, where every letter stands for something? Enthusiasm, respect, tradition, awareness, and open flexibility. Oops. Sorry. Now, in this concept then of spiritual intelligence, when we're thinking about ourselves, so now we have a definition, okay? This definition of spiritual intelligence, the spiritual force have you. Inshallah, I believe that if you're a Muslim and you pray 5 times a day, you have both feet in this space of that spiritual force and the capacity to access it as much as you make a decision that you want to. Another part of prophethood that was a sign of spiritual intelligence was prophethood itself. Where did the Prophet ﷺ get wahi from, revelation from? Revelation came from the angel, when the angel spoke to him, when angel and human matter met, but also from true dreams. And the only thing left of prophethood, the Prophet ﷺ told us, is true dreams. Now, some people think, MashaAllah, that person, she's so good, she has true dreams. No, that's not the way it works. You might have high spiritual intelligence, but being a person of spiritual intelligence doesn't make you a person of Jannah. It just means that you have that skill. Being a person of true dreams, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent, we know from the Quran that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent dreams to Pharaoh, or dreams to Pharaoh, who was the worst of the creatures, the humans. And to the governor of Egypt when Yusuf was called to respond, right? So we can't say that, oh, this person has true dreams, then mashallah. That's not the way it works. Sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends dreams to you to wake you up. And sometimes just to remind you that there is something called an unseen world that we live in and walk in all the time. Some people I saw a post on Facebook, someone was asking, she said, I have the weirdest true dreams. Like I dream of a brand of toy that I'm going to buy, and then I find myself in the store buying it. I didn't respond to that post because I was busy, but she was asking, like, what does this even mean? Because what happens to us when we start to see true dreams? What happens to us? We start to think about ourselves, wow, mashallah, maybe I am really good. And the truth is that it may be, very, very truly, it may be that you have a real access to spiritual intelligence. But that is just like if you're really good at math and you don't go to school and you don't learn it and you don't use it, what happens to your really good at math skill? I mean, it becomes really good to count your spaghetti boxes in the cupboard, but others, pasta, what do you call spaghetti here? Macaroni boxes in the cupboard, and you're fine. And that's it. That's the end of it. You're not going to be a math genius. You're not going to crack the newest string theory code. You're going to just be someone who's good at accounting with your house finances. Well, alhamdulillah, it's a blessing. But same thing with spiritual intelligence. Maybe you do have spiritual intelligence because you see true dreams. But if you do nothing about it, if you stay a person who doesn't pray, and you stay a person who misses prayers, or you don't really take seriously this Islam thing, then that spiritual intelligence will be just like the counting of the macaroni boxes in the cupboard. It's something that was a gift. It's something you had, but because you didn't train it, like the Jedi, they didn't want to train Anakin Skywalker because he was too old to be trained. And in the end, they were right, because he was so old, he was 7 or something. He was so old that he'd never learned how to control his emotions. And because he didn't learn how to control his emotions, he messed up and went to the dark side. But for us, if we're not going to follow up on spiritual intelligence that we have, what can happen? We're just going to dwarf it and sit it on the cupboard, sit it on the shelf somewhere, or shrink it, I should say, more correctly, and stick it in a cupboard somewhere. And then it's fine, alhamdulillah, I'm like I'm good at adding up if I'm good at math, or I'm very good at spatial. I have a strong spatial intelligence, but I didn't study geometry. And so what I'm really good at is directions. Like I can get anywhere in a car, mashallah, but that's it. Like I can design a room. Like my daughter called me over and said, help me figure out this room. So I can do stuff like that. But I'm not a geometrist. I don't do any of that other stuff. So I didn't train that intelligence that I personally have. I didn't train it. Same thing with spiritual intelligence. If we don't train it, where will we go with it? Where will we go with it? We also know that there were people around the Prophet ﷺ that had spiritual intelligence as well. Maysara, the young servant that Khadija radiallahu anha sent with the Prophet ﷺ when he was young to follow him, and he noticed the signs in Rasulullah. We usually tell that story because we're talking about how great the Prophet ﷺ was, but let's think about it instead as Maysara. What kind of spiritual intelligence did he have that he could notice the difference in this man from others? How did he notice and see the cloud that followed him? How did he understand that cloud was not an accident? Some people would just be like, yeah, you're right. That's true. And that would be like, oh, like really they didn't get it. So he really had a particular intelligence. And there were others as well around Ibn Abbas, the son of Abbas, he saw the angel speaking with the Prophet when he was a young boy. And he was with his father and his father didn't see. And as they walked away, his father said to him, why wasn't he responding to me? Because he called out for Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's strange, he didn't respond to me. And his son said to him, but father, didn't you see he's talking to someone? And he said, what? And he took him back. He took him back. And the Prophet ﷺ looked at Ibn Abbas and said, you saw him? You saw the angel, you saw Angel Gabriel? So what is this? It's a different capacity. People have different capacities. And so we want to think about how to cultivate our own spiritual intelligence. So maybe we can't go to Jedi school. You can, but it's just kidding. Anyway, you can't go to real Jedi school with like the lightsaber and all of that. But there is cultivation of spiritual intelligence. So it's if you can think about it in 4 quadrants. Okay, the first quadrant is how am I going to cultivate my self-awareness? Because self-awareness is an important part of spiritual intelligence. The second piece is how do I cultivate a universal awareness? How am I aware of the rest of the world? And the third piece is how do I master myself? How do I get in control of myself? This is a Jedi thing, getting in control of those emotions. And finally, how do I develop a spiritual presence? So I'm going to go back to them. First one, how do I build self-awareness? That is not selfishness, because we live in a time that's like self-care, mashallah. Self-care, it's time, are you okay? You need some more self-care time. And like there's so much self-care time that the tests don't get done. We don't study because we're too busy self-caring with pizza, Netflix binging, movies, popcorn, and we don't get the stuff done. So self-awareness is not self-care. Self-awareness is first and foremost to have an awareness of how do you think? What do you think about? What's your worldview? What's your worldview? And as a Muslim now, we want to figure out what is the Muslim worldview? And how much of that do I understand? How much of that is my worldview? And how much of my worldview actually has nothing to do with Islam? And how much of that do I want to change? Where do I want to be in that space? What's my life purpose? What is the hierarchy of what's important to me and what isn't? And where is that for real? We really need to ask ourselves deep questions. It's complex. There's a complexity of inner thought that we can't drown out with Netflix or Audible books. And now people are so used to being entertained that we really don't like to be alone and quiet. It's uncomfortable. And so we're playing Audible books, or we're playing podcasts, or we're binging on a Netflix series, or what have you. And right now I'm not talking about the particular value or lack of value in any of those things. You may be listening to incredible Audible books that you're really benefiting from. Instead, I just want to address the idea of, can we sit in silence that is not silent on the inside? Sit in a silence where we can go in and listen to, examine the complexity of our inner thought and know who we are. And really know, because that will grow our spiritual awareness. It'll also give us the ability, if I go to the third one I mentioned, but if I go to this now, it'll give us the ability to master our inner selves. So the Jedis, what was wrong with Anakin Skywalker? What's wrong with Anakin Skywalker is that he could not control his emotions. What Yoda says, you be aware of fear, fear leads to anger, and anger leads to the dark side. That's one of my favorite quotes. But if we don't have an understanding of what we're afraid of, we don't even know. Like, what are you afraid of? We talked about, yesterday we mentioned in the one we did when we talked about this at Bart's, we talked about this idea of our telephone. So our phone, if your phone is running out of charge, wherever you are, you're going to find someone to help you plug it in. Can I borrow your battery? Do you have a cord? How can I get this plugged in? You're going to find a way, even if you have to disturb the lecture that you're in. Excuse me, just a minute. You're going to walk around and look for a place to plug in your phone. Because we can't live without our phone. I'm at 1%. What's going to happen? I'm at 1%. But for our prayer, how many of us are willing to get up and leave a lecture to pray because we don't want to miss it? How many of us are willing to pray in public even though people are watching, even though they might see me? How many of us are willing to be public about our spiritual selves? Well, and if we're not capable, why not? It's because of fear. What are people going to say? What are they going to think about me? What are they going to say on the inside about me? And that fear leads to anger. And anger leads to the dark side. So self-mastery is the ability to really know who you are, to keep your higher self in charge. To keep the self of you that you want, that you're proud of, that you're growing, in charge of everything that's going on the inside. And this helps us to sustain our faith. This gives us a capacity to grow and sustain our faith. Not unlike Luke Skywalker, who was capable, even though he was even older when he started on the Jedi path, which breaks the idea that you have to be young. And that's part of the whole point of the movie, which is he starts much later, but he's able to hold on to his higher values. So he has a stronger spiritual intelligence in our definition. What about the universal piece, the other quadrants, universal awareness? The universal awareness is an awareness of things around us. So for Jedis, you don't want a lot. What did he say? Obi-Wan Kenobi, when they're trying to get out of town, and the clone comes up to him and says, "Show us your ID." He says, "You don't want to see our ID papers." "I don't want to see your ID papers." And my husband has a sheikh, rahmatullah alayhi. The sheikh passed now, but he lived in the time of French colonization of Damascus. And he would tell a story about how one time he was driving from one place to the other and he didn't have his paperwork with him, and they got stopped at a checkpoint. And literally the window came down and they said, where are your papers? And he said, "You don't need to see our papers." He said, "I don't need to see your papers." It's literally a Jedi mind trick. It's a real Jedi mind trick of just, this, and that's an awareness of, in the movies, they say that people's minds are very simple. So the ability to control them is part of the Jedi power with the Force. But for us, it's an awareness of human beings, an awareness and respect of them, an awareness and understanding of the world, and an awareness that really we need to come as Muslims in this world. We need to come to a place where we really, really know, the capital K, that belief in God and sticking to the sunnah of Rasulullah and the lifestyle of beauty and joy of faith, that this is the capital T road of happiness. And any level of distance we have from that place is simply a level of pain. Distance is a level of emptiness. When we really know that, we'll build an ummah that isn't jealous, that isn't running after the materialism and secularism of society, but rather is standing up as leaders, leading the ethics and values of the societies we live in, leading and helping and growing, like the Jedis. They're supposed to be. They said, "I can't fight a war. We're peacekeepers. We're not here. We don't fight wars. We create beautiful cultures." And this is what Muslims are called to do. When we say we're called to enjoy what is right, we're called to bring what is beautiful. And we're called to push back on what is ugly. This isn't what we're doing. We're not doing this right now. But this is what we've been called upon to do. And so the fourth quadrant is to have social mastery. So the first one was our spiritual selves, and then mastering it. Know ourselves and master ourselves. The second is know our social environment where we are, and then be have a spiritual presence in it. Be the compassionate, wise Obi-Wan Kenobi. Be the compassionate, wise Yoda. Know how to interact wherever we are. This is the spiritual intelligence that we are really needing in our society. We can sum it up with a couple of words. The first is a calmness on the inside. So when we have intelligent mastery of ourselves, it's a calmness. Whatever anxious thing that happens, whatever tragedy or trauma that happens, it doesn't mean we're not sad. It doesn't mean we don't have emotions. But everything is within a place of calm. We can manage it. And then socially, it means that we are people of compassionate and wise action. Compassionate and wise. It doesn't mean we're always doormats. It means that we're compassionate and wise. We have proactive action to create beautiful societies and joyful societies. And in the spiritual intelligence of the Muslim, our lightsaber becomes really our masbaha, if you will. It becomes the thing that we're carrying around to spread light wherever we go. Filling ourselves with light and dumping it in different places. Filling and dumping, filling and dumping. So we need some practical, maybe, ways of developing spiritual intelligence in our children and in ourselves. One way is through the arts. And this is one of the reasons that we as Muslims, I think, have gone away from spiritual intelligence. We haven't really been able to access it because we're not really good at the arts anymore. We have a fear of them. We're all afraid of the arts. But actually, the arts in literature and in poetry and in paintings and in beautiful, looking at beautiful things and hearing beautiful things and doing beautiful things and writing beautiful things, in this beauty is the elevation of society and the heart. And so we need to bring the arts back to our Islamic schools. We need to bring beauty into our masajid. If you travel in the Middle East and in Malaysia, Bismillah, mashallah, Malaysia. Malaysia, if you go to Malaysia and you go to the mosques, they make you feel elevated. You look, even as women, because you can go in. And you go in and you're like, and your eyes look up and your heart goes up and the colors are beautiful and the carpet is clean. And I don't want to scare you, but if you make sujood, it smells good. It's crazy. Subhanallah. I know, how do they do that? It's just like, wow, keeping it clean. And actually in the mosque, this is a footnote, although maybe it has to do with spiritual intelligence. Many of the mosques have like this long row of massage chairs. Yeah, so you go in, you're like, so, if it's not quite time to pray yet, you put a couple of the Malaysian money, I don't remember what it's called, and you sit in the chair for a few minutes, and they're like, these are good, fancy, expensive massage chairs, so they're really nice. Really nice. What? Get ready for prayer. Or, if you're a woman and you're menstruating, so you're not going into the prayer hall, you can be like, go in, kids, I'll just wait for you out here. Nice. Quite unlike the masjids around the world that have no space for women at all. And in that really sad place for women in masajid is the shrinking of our spiritual intelligence. We don't raise our sights. We don't see beauty. If we don't see beauty, we won't feel beauty. It doesn't have to be millions of dollars, but it has to be beautiful. It has to be clean. It has to smell good. The masjid, if we want to raise the spiritual intelligence of ourselves and then our children and our families and the next generations, so we don't want a generation to come that we've just lost everyone, because mark my words, if we don't do something soon, that will happen. We need to elevate our spiritual sense. Look at the Jedis. They have special robes. They look fancy. You can tell a Jedi from the others because of the way they walk. They walk with confidence. Their robes flow behind them. They have a special belt to hold their lightsaber, special boots. And it doesn't matter where they're going, they're always neat and tidy because they're Jedis. And even they're so calm. They're fighting and then they're like, This is how our mosques should feel. Fancy. No matter where we are, no matter what we're fighting on the outside, we walk in the mosque. Most of the time, we don't feel like that. I don't know about the men, but for women, when we can find a mosque to go into, we don't feel like that. The best is like, I'm sorry, sister, you can't pray here. Why can't I pray? This is no woman here. Okay, where should I pray? It's parking lot. Really? Like, can we stand in front of Allah? Can we stand in front of Allah Azza wa Jal on the Day of Judgment and say, I had a masjid, but I made a woman pray in the parking lot? Does this fit with the ethos and spirituality of Islam? Of course not. But it happens every day. It happens every day around the world. Yeah, for shame. Where is the spiritual intelligence in that? Where is the art in that? Where is the beauty in that? Most of the literature written in the world today, novels about Muslims, in a novel, in a plot, there's always a problem that the protagonist is trying to get over. Most of the novels with Muslims as main characters, their problem is their religion. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Where is the spiritual intelligence in that? How are we raising our own children when they are reading these books? Or how about the non-Muslim public? Where are they reading? Where is the place that we are writing books that have beautiful words, that have beautiful lives, that have happiness and joy emanating from their pages, that lift people up in a spiritual, beautiful way? Where are those books and why aren't we writing them? What about in music and sound? We have some beautiful nasheed artists, mashallah. And then we have others, you're like, please, I don't want to hear you. Just stop. Don't sing. It's just better. In our classes, and Ribat, my online classes, we always have music on, nasheed on before the class starts. And there are volunteer admins who get the class ready. And I will not have children singing. Like, I cannot stand this thing. I mean, I am 53 years old. Why are you playing little kids singing, La ilaha illallah, and they sound like chipmunks? I don't understand it. People have hearts. And I mean, do we think that Muslims aren't listening to music? It's really funny. Like, we think they're not listening to the rest of the music, the people with actually nice voices out there. And they are, of course they are. So what is the thing about offering the alternative chipmunk voice? I don't get it. I understand it not, as Yoda might say. I don't understand it. And so, I mean, we need to be, let's think for a minute. Let's be sensitive. Let's think about these ears that Allah created and the elevation. When there is someone who recites Quran beautifully, you listen. When there's someone who calls the adhan beautifully, what is it with letting people call the adhan who croak? It should be a beautiful adhan. Oh, we don't want to make him feel bad. It's okay, make him feel bad. No problem. The Prophet ﷺ, there was a man who dreamt of the adhan, ya habibati. He dreamt of it. He dreamt of the adhan. If you dreamt of the adhan, wouldn't you feel like this is my right? It's my dream. The Prophet ﷺ said, go teach it to Bilal. He has a nicer voice than you. It's okay. If he doesn't have a nice voice, sit down. No problem. Let's open the hearts and minds of people with beautiful voices. Beautiful voices that open our hearts. This is how we elevate spiritual intelligence. This is how we bring it back. What about our eyes? What are we looking at? What about art? I talked about the masajid, but what about art? What are we doing with art these days? We're so afraid. Ya Allah, I wrote, when I was still living in Syria with my sister-in-law, we used to write children's curriculum programs. And it was so difficult to find artists that knew how to draw human beings. Oh my God, and now I run a publishing company, and we're doing children's books. And we did the curricula about women in history, and it's so difficult still to find Muslims who know how to draw human beings. Someone sent me a picture with human beings with no faces. I'm like, that's scary. I'm not giving that to children. We don't, a children's book with a no face? What's wrong with us? What?
You can get a doll like that as well.
La ilaha illallah. Are we Amish? Like, are we Amish, really? Like, are we really Amish? What is that? I don't understand. It doesn't have any roots in Islamic tradition. Why are we afraid of a doll? What's wrong with us? Like, really, what's wrong with us? And what's wrong with us that we're drawing pictures for children, our children? Do we think that they don't see other pictures anywhere else? And here's the book about Islam, no face. And here's the book about patience and love and living a nice English life. Hello, where do you want to go? I'm living the English life with eyes and a nose, thank you very much. I'm not living this weird Muslim life with no face. Think of the underlying message, that there's no face on these people. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. And Shaitan has had a winning day. MashaAllah. And we have to think what we're giving to our children. What are we giving them in beauty and in books that they read? And books are critical. What are they looking at in the pictures? It's so hard for me to find Muslims who will draw. Some of them tell me, oh, I can draw. They can't. They can't. They think they can. Yani, mashallah, they can copy a little bit, but they're not artists. I need someone who's an artist, who is strong, has enough spiritual intelligence, strong enough faith to study art without, we're all like, oh, don't study art. We're so scared for you. And unfortunately, that's because many of us are so wimpy that we're like, study art. And I don't know, what is the attraction? I don't understand, like this attraction of distance from Allah in art. Why? You know why? Okay, I'm going to change. I changed my mind. I decided I know why. Because there's a spirituality in art. And so whether it's music or whether it's art or whether it's literature, there's a spirituality there that can fill us instead of course it will never fill us enough, but it can substitute for a while. And so who is feeling fear, being different, that fear can bring them to the dark side, where art then fills them up in the wrong way. But we as Muslims, we need this art. We need beautiful pictures. We need beautiful illustrations. We need full, beautiful illustrations. We need beautiful things that we hear and smells. And we need something that smells like something other than curry. Yani, we need beautiful, whatever smells good to the person. Like for some people, they love flowery jasmine smells. Other people like musky cinnamon smells. Whatever, but we all like one smell. That's the smell of clean. Muslims should smell the cleanest of all. The cleanest of all. This is all about spiritual intelligence. And we need to teach our children these things and bring art back into our schools. Islamic schools should be the most beautiful, the most exciting. Our mosques should be the most beautiful. Any other building we walk into that is a building in the secular world should be here. And when we walk into the mosque, it should be here. Right now, I know it's not like that. Right now, it's the opposite. And when we pray, I want everyone to go to Malaysia so you can really feel what it's like, as a woman especially, to enter a mosque. Because for the brothers, most of the time you enter a mosque and at least you see what was originally intended, even if it's not clean. But for women, it's really tough because we're just not allowed in that space, which is a whole nother conversation, which does not lend to spiritual intelligence for women or for our children. And it's a real Jedi mistake. What else do we need to do? Let's talk about other ways to create spiritual intelligence. So outside of the arts, we need to create positive environments wherever we are. We need to get away from being the cranky Muslim, because the cranky Muslim is not helping us. It's not helping us raise others. And when I said this somewhere else last week, and at the end somebody got up and told me, yeah, Muslims are so cranky. And I was like, I'm not talking to the other ones, I'm talking to you. You stop being cranky, and then everybody else might stop being cranky. But it's being cranky to complain about other people being cranky. That's just being cranky. So we need to just stop being cranky Muslims. Let's just be happy Muslims. If we're not happy, find out why you're not happy, fix it. Hello. That's what you would do with your job. It's something going on in your life. Fix it and stop being cranky. We need to really have a commitment to prayer. Now, there are 3 different types of prayer in Islam. dua, dhikr, and salah. Salah is the ritual prayer. We need to be committed to that. But we need to understand that dua and dhikr are part of what makes a rich spiritual life. And without one of them, we're missing something. And so we need to commit to that, like really think about it. Think about each day of our lives. And now we're heading into 2020, so we have an opportunity to say, how many hours of dua do I want in the decade between 2020 and 2030? How many hours of Quran reading? How many khitmes do I want to have read? How much dua do I want to have made? How many prayers do I want to have? Do I want that decade to be the decade when I don't miss a single fardh prayer? This is an opportunity. It's an opportunity for us to uplift our spiritual lives with our own personal spiritual intelligence. Another way to build a spiritual intelligence is to build a culture of spiritual intelligence all around us. And so this includes self-discipline. It also includes something else that we're all kind of embarrassed about as Muslims, and that is a moral life. There's research that just came out. Maybe it didn't. No, I'm sorry. There's research that came out in the 20s. But somebody just recently wrote an article about it that I read. And this research, somebody did an anthropological study of different cultures around the world. And what they found was that cultures that have a basic moral compass are cultures that last. And cultures that don't have a high standard of morality are cultures that don't last. And right now, we live in a global culture that looks down on and disdains high moral values, for the most part, especially when we're talking about sexual values. And we as Muslims, we have an opportunity here, because we have within our faith structure, we have a real moral, value-driven, a high moral standard for living in this life. We do. And sometimes we're kind of embarrassed about that. We're like, but we should feel really proud of it. We should feel proud that we offer, you take it or leave it. We're not forcing it down anyone's throat, but we offer this opportunity for a high. Now, the Jedis, how do they stay Jedis in the Star Wars universe? The only way to stay a Jedi is they don't even get married. They don't get married. They can't have girlfriends, boyfriends, none of this stuff. Why? Because they want them to stay really focused and be able to continue to help the universe in good. Well, for Muslims, we don't say you can't get married, but we say there is something more important. There is taking care of this, being the khulafa al-ard, being those who are responsible for this earth. And to hold up that role of khalifa, we have certain moral standards that we're not embarrassed of. We know that this morality helps our spiritual intelligence, keeps us smart, keeps us capable of keeps us in that space of wisdom. And this isn't something we should feel embarrassed about. So spiritual intelligence includes self-discipline, it includes morality, it includes purpose, having purpose, and when we courage. One of the very critical mistakes of Muslims, in my opinion, has been to swallow hook, line, and sinker. That's a fishing metaphor, sorry, if you guys don't fish. In Minnesota, we go fishing. Now, when you fish, I just have to tell you so you understand the metaphor. If you fish, you throw your line into the lake, okay? And on the line, there's a hook, and there's a sinker that makes the hook go down, and then there's the line, okay? Now, to catch a fish, usually, you just have to hook it on the side of the mouth. But if it's a big fish, they might get away. And once in a while, you get these fish, they swallow the whole hook, and then they'll even swallow the sinker. And if they've really swallowed it, they swallow the hook, the line, and the sinkers. That's a lot. So if you pull them out of the water, you're for sure going to get them, and then you got to yank it out. It's really gross. You get all their guts out with the hook. Okay, you got the metaphor now? So as Muslims, we have swallowed hook, line, and sinker, the Christian understanding of what it means to be a woman. Because the Christian understanding of what it means to be a woman is pink and fluffy and, kind of weak and can't really do anything. And oh, mashallah, just kind of a pretty little piece of property that sits over there. It's not the Muslim way. It just factually, it is not the Muslim way. I wrote a paper, some of you may have read it, in the Yaqeen Institute collection of papers, about Muslim women. And I did an entire study of Muslim women, of women in the Quran, women around the Prophet ﷺ, women after the Prophet ﷺ, up until today. Muslim women, if you want to talk about how do we define femininity, courage and commitment. Courage and commitment has nothing to do with pink. By the way, pink was a boy's color before 1930, just FYI. It has nothing to do with heels. It has nothing to do with thousands of dollars in makeup. It has to do with one thing, two things, courage and commitment. We see it again and again and again. And spiritual intelligence, part of spiritual intelligence is courage and commitment. And so if we can hold on to these things, and the last one that is part of, not the last, but another important piece of spiritual intelligence is love. But not Hollywood love. Not Hollywood love, because Hollywood love is weak. Hollywood love has to do with infatuation and lust and things like this. Love is when you're willing to put other people before yourself. When you're willing to extend yourself for the spiritual growth of other people. I wish I could say that's my own personal definition. It's a definition of a psychologist whose name is Dr. Scott Peck. The willingness to extend yourself for someone else's spiritual growth. All of these things come together to create spiritual intelligence. We can create a culture of spiritual intelligence, and especially your generation, you have this capacity because you're going to decide how your families are. You're going to decide how your institutions are. You're going to decide what your children's books look like. I beg you, put faces on the people. You're going to decide what books your children read. You're going to decide what's on the walls. You're going to decide what your masajid look like. You're going to decide whether or not your daughters are going to be allowed in these masajid. And so you need to be Jedis about this and carry your lightsaber and really have the spiritual force and the spiritual intelligence that is needed to make the kinds of changes that we all need, but especially the next generation are really going to need. They're not going to survive without them. So if we can just say then in summary that we have this spiritual intelligence that we're defining, and just as a reminder that habits of worship are the habits that give strength to spiritual intelligence. Habits of worship are not in and of themselves spiritual intelligence. A person could pray and pray and pray and pray and still be thick in the head. But worship habits give strength to spiritual intelligence and give them, and it increases it and makes it greater as a practice. It can grow your spiritual intelligence. Dua, dhikr, fasting, prayer, reading Quran, and the last few little more dunya ways of creating spiritual intelligence. I'll close with these. Ways to do it for yourself, okay? So another way is to listen and draw. Like to just close your eyes and listen to someone. You could either listen to someone describe something and draw what they're saying, or you can go out somewhere and close your eyes and just listen to whatever you hear and draw it. This is a real way to get into yourself in a different way. Another important spiritual activity that is when Rumi and Shams, they say that when Rumi and Shams first met each other, or not when they met each other, sorry, when they first went into khalwa together, into a retreat together, they spent the first of it just gazing into each other's eyes. And now they have all this research. I don't remember all the research because I haven't done enough reading about it, but they have research now that just a long, deep gaze into someone's eyes can change how you feel towards them. Like they do it with married couples in order to get rid of animosity. And they're doing it all with like friends, and it's a whole thing. And it's like, have you been doing it in your therapy work?
So obviously I work with children, I'm a psychologist, and I work with mothers and babies.
Yeah.
And that's the first start of it, isn't it? It's
Yes.
the mother to her child.
Yes.
It's absolutely essential in brain development as well as attachment and everything else.
Yeah. Yeah, so that one we've known about for a while, the mother-baby one, but now they're extending it to others. So that the deep gaze, it's actually a little bit scary. Don't do it with someone you're not sure of. You might see things you didn't want to see. Touching and describing, to touch something and describe it to someone. That's another way to work on your spiritual intelligence. And of course, smells are really connected to memories. So if you smell something and have a memory, share it with someone. Share that memory, because sharing it helps you to access it more often. And then finally, taste can remind people of institutions. And that's one of the reasons converts struggle with mosques, because converts, they went to church and they used to eat egg salad sandwiches, and they come to the mosque and they eat rice. And they're like, this doesn't taste like a religious institution. And you're like, but egg salad sandwiches taste like the gas station. Like, that doesn't taste like a religious institution. And so there's a taste, and institutions is actually really part of our spiritual, all of our senses. And so I guess I can just say in sum, spiritual intelligence is the ability as Muslims for us to access this the world that we live in, to thin the veil between us and the unseen world. And in doing that, to create a culture and a movement really, where Muslims are no longer sitting in the back of some kind of weird bus that we've been put on. But instead, we're standing at the forefront with our real understanding of Tawheed, La ilaha illallah, our true love of Rasulullah, salatu wassalamu alayhi, and our real understanding of what that means and how we live our lives today, wherever we're living them in this global society. And if we can do that, we can really be the Jedis of today, which I have to say everywhere we go. If you look at the word Mujaddideen, okay, Mujaddideen, who are they? The Prophet ﷺ said, these are the ones who are sent every 100 years. Man yujaddideenakum, right? Those who renew and revive your religion. Mujaddideen. If you take, what's the middle word? Jedi. Hello. So we can all be the Jedis, inshallah, of this time, if we really grow spiritual intelligence around us and make sure to grow it within ourselves and really think about growing it in our children and our institutions. Salatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina wa Habibina Muhammad. Alhamdulillah.
Keep the faith.